Monkey worked at Yahoo, and these are important entrepreneurship at California. Thank you for coming. And he will share some ideas with us about his experience, so everybody enjoy the experience. And will be 20 minutes. How many minutes? Half an hour of speaking, and after this we will be comfortable to make questions. Okay? I know that you have lots of questions, so be comfortable. Dave, thank you. Please.
All right, well, I guess I'm just speaking to the mic because of the recording. But we'll try to make this fairly informal and hopefully useful. So, just a question, and you can be honest. How many of you have actually created a survey using SurveyMonkey? Not too many. Okay, we got some work to do. Good, okay. So, let's see if this works. Is this not the clicker? Let's see. Hold on. This one? It wasn't on. That'll work. Okay, let's try this again. There we go. So I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about what it's like in Silicon Valley and sort of how you want to think about being entrepreneurs outside of the place of Silicon Valley. I think the question is, a lot of people think, oh my gosh, we're never going to be able to sort of do startups in a place like Brazil that's going to be compared to Silicon Valley. And in the past, that has been true, but I think that's changing. And I think it's very exciting. I've met with a lot of entrepreneurs since I've been here. And I think Silicon Valley is a place, it is a physical location. It is actually a lot less exciting than Sao Paulo. For those of you that come to Silicon Valley and you wander around, you're sort of like, this seems kind of like a quiet suburban area. It doesn't seem that exciting. And it is not a big city. We're near San Francisco, but we're not in San Francisco. But there is a tremendous dynamism in the place of Silicon Valley. But more importantly, it's about a culture. And that culture certainly is its fullest expression in the location of Silicon Valley, but that culture today extends all over the world. And I think it's possible to embrace that culture outside of the location. So we'll talk about a few of the things that I think make up that culture. I think most importantly, it's a culture where the entrepreneurs and startups are exalted. They're put on a pedestal. And I understand from talking to people since I've been here this week that 10, 15 years ago, there wasn't really a word in the dictionary in Portuguese for entrepreneur. Impresario, I think, was the word that was used, which had some negative connotations. And parts of the United States and other parts of the world, that was also true. But in Silicon Valley, the entrepreneur, the person who takes risks, the person who does the crazy things and starts their own company, that person is the one that's revered and exalted. Not because they make a lot of money. That's a byproduct of being a successful entrepreneur, but it's not the goal. And in fact, I would say to you that you should not be an entrepreneur to make a lot of money. There's probably a lot of easier ways on a risk-adjusted basis to make money. Particularly if you're studying here at a very good school and all those kind of things. And being an entrepreneur is because you have a passion, a belief in what you want to do, because you feel that you have something to add by creating and running a company. That's the reason to be an entrepreneur. I think, so a couple of principles that are really important to sort of bring this culture of the entrepreneur, this Silicon Valley idea, all over the world. One of the biggest ones is that failure is okay. And I know this seems counterintuitive. Why would you want to fail? And of course, no one wants to fail. But you have to accept up front, if you are an entrepreneur, that you're likely going to fail. And that's okay. Most startups fail, but you learn from a failed startup. Most investors that invest in startups know that they fail. Sometimes they work, and that's great, but you can't plan on it. But you can learn from your failure, and the next time do well from it. And a lot of very successful entrepreneurs, their first startups failed. Sometimes their second startups failed. I think Mark Pincus, who founded a company called Zynga, which has been very successful. I think Mark had 4 failed startups before he did Zynga. But not only did Mark learn from those failures, but they weren't held against him. And in fact, in Silicon Valley, those failures are a mark of experience. They're, it's not only okay, it's kind of a good thing, because if you've tried and failed, you've learned from that experience, and you've gone on to then sort of not repeat that mistake again, and to learn how to do things. And you might have failed for reasons that were out of your control. You know, you might have just run out of money and you couldn't raise any more. There's a whole bunch of reasons you fail. Sometimes you fail because of your own causes too, but startups fail, and you have to be willing to accept that they fail. You have to plan that yours is going to fail, but you have to also be in a culture that accepts that failure. And I think that's probably the single most important thing, and it's something that it takes time to change. Secondly, there needs to be capital. And I'll tell you the story about SurveyMonkey in a little bit. SurveyMonkey was founded with no capital, never raised any money, but that is the exception, not the rule. So funding needs to be available in order to bring this Silicon Valley culture, and that funding is really important. It's not just money. What happens in Silicon Valley that makes it work so well is the money comes with experience. The money comes with advice. You're better off taking less money from someone who can help you than more money from someone who doesn't know what they're doing. I made that mistake very early on in my career. I would never make it again. I took some money from an investor who was not a great investor. And it really hurt me all along the road. I had other investors who didn't want to invest alongside this investor, and it was a huge problem for me. I think, you know, it is very easy to get funded today in the place of Silicon Valley. It is getting easier outside, but it's not easy. It's probably the biggest single challenge that people who start companies here face. But I think it's going to change. It will change for 2 reasons. One, you have, particularly in the internet space, some companies that are finally kind of getting to the scale where they're going to go public, and they will be very good success stories. That will draw more investors in, but more importantly, those people who started those companies, or who were the early people who worked those companies, will do well financially. Those people will be the best funders for new startups, because they will have the experience and the capital personally. And I think entrepreneurs feel this need to help out other entrepreneurs. That's why I do angel investing. That's why most of my friends who do angel investing do it. Not necessarily to make a lot of money, but to help other people like people help me. And so you haven't had enough of those here yet, but as those come, you know, you've got a few, but certainly companies like Netshoes and Vostu and Decolar and probably missing a whole bunch I've got on my other slide. But anyway, as those companies go public, I think there'll be a lot of funding that comes from it, and it'll be less than the people. It will be more important than what the people who are just looking for a pure return will do. And lastly, you got to have the support mechanisms in place. So what are those support mechanisms? Well, this school is part of those support mechanisms, right? Sort of the learning and the ability to bring people in, to help people understand to sort of be able to pull back entrepreneurs who've been here, have them come into the community, that's important. So the learning and the education is critical. There are other things, accountants, lawyers, PR firms, and we've noticed a difference just in the last year since I first came down to now. There just does seem to be a lot more of those support mechanisms in place. It's still not enough, but those people are really valuable because they have incredible knowledge transfer. They've worked with lots and lots of different startups. And so they can tell you, hey, you know, I saw what these guys did and it didn't work and you shouldn't try that because it didn't work for them, or here's what the funders are really looking for, and those kind of things. So the support mechanism around the culture of the entrepreneur is really the other sort of critical piece, and people underestimate it. Most importantly, you just have to have this mindset that also anybody can be an entrepreneur, anybody can do it. I think one of the things in Silicon Valley is very clear. No one cares where you went to school, what you look like, how old you are. You know, if you had a job before you started the company or not, none of that stuff matters. People just value what you're doing. And if you do a good job, and you, even if your startup fails, but you create value, you show people you know how to build a business, that's what's really important. And you have passion for your idea. You got to have passion for what you're doing, not necessarily for the specific product idea maybe in the beginning, because those can change, but the passion for your mission, what you're trying to do. No? Or passion for the clicker. Okay. All right. I don't have that many slides, so. I'll just tell you a quick story. I started my first company when I was 26, and Silicon Valley was a lot more like what you would see here. There was not that many startups that were getting funded. There was no network of angel investors to go to. I didn't know anyone who had ever started a company before. I didn't know anyone who'd raised any venture capital. And it was really hard. And I raised my first $100,000. I started with my partner, who was my best friend from high school. Neither of us could write any code, so we had to raise money so we could build a prototype of what we were doing. And so we raised $100,000 from our friends and family because those are the only people who are going to give you money on a business plan with no experience. And we told them that we were going to lose their money. They should never expect to see it again. Now that wasn't true. They did end up making money, but you don't want to lose. Those are the last people's money you want to lose, by the way, is those people. But those are the people who most likely lose their money in a startup. So the company was called Launch Media. We started with this idea that that the computer was going to change the way people learned and discovered music. That it could be an alternative to radio and MTV as a way to discover music, and then you could put ads around it and make it a media business. So this doesn't sound that interesting right now, but in 1993, 94, there were no ads on computers. There certainly wasn't anybody listening to music or watching videos on computers. And in some ways, we were a little ahead of ourselves. But we managed to build this prototype. We eventually raised more money. And we started the first part of our business was a CD-ROM that came out every month. And it was like a magazine from a business model perspective, in that we had subscribers and we had advertisers, although it was mostly driven by ad revenue. But the experience was like a really rich broadband experience on a disc, which was the only way to get music and video to people's computers in 1995 and 94. Now, we eventually morphed this business, and this is what I said, like the product idea versus the vision. The vision we had was to change the way people learned about and discovered music. We went through various iterations of what the product was. We started with CD-ROM, we moved online to the web, but it was mostly text. We really couldn't deliver audio and video on the web until 98, 99, and even that was pretty crude. But eventually we were able to deliver a great, rich media experience. We built the largest music site on the web. We took it public in 1999. We sold it to Yahoo in 2001. And I stayed at Yahoo for 6 more years running that business. And by the time I left, the business had 60 million unique users a month, 5 billion music videos streamed a year. We're the largest internet radio service. We built a music subscription service, and really kind of had changed the way people learned about and discovered music. And so, even though the product changed, had we not started when we started, had we not built the reputation with consumers, with advertisers, with artists, record labels, we would never have been able to kind of build the other things that we did down the line. We would not have had the capital to be able to kind of invest in the web and all those kind of things. So even though I sort of think I started too early, it did end up working out. But there was no guarantee, and we had a lot of bad moments. And you're going to have, particularly in a startup, a lot more bad moments than good moments. There are really good moments. And like I said, I was lucky. Mine worked. But I went into it thinking it wasn't going to work. In the first year and a half, I was just convinced it wasn't going to work. And then it actually kind of got scary when I thought it might work. And I've hired all these people, and now they were counting on me to keep raising money because we didn't make a profit for a long time, so we had to keep raising capital. And I wasn't that good at it. But you know, I stuck through it, and that's the thing you do, is you sort of find a way around it. And I'm not going to even try and do the butcher the Brazilian phrase, but someone told me the other night, the Brazilian way, sort of finding your way around things that are sort of the headaches in your way. That's a good trait for an entrepreneur, because that's what you have to do. You've got to find your way around all the obstacles all the time. And you've got to stay focused on your goal, because it's easy to get distracted on lots of other things. So anyway, I think there's a lot of lessons in there, and I'm happy to talk about it, but I think I was able to start my company and be successful in a culture that didn't exist in Silicon Valley like it does today. That is true. Yeah, that is a striking resemblance. It's Ed, the lead singer of the band Live. So SurveyMonkey, I ended up at SurveyMonkey because after I left Yahoo, I was at Benchmark Capital as an entrepreneur in residence, wanted to figure out what I wanted to do, and I got a call from another growth equity firm called Spectrum Equity, and they asked me to help them take a look at SurveyMonkey, and they had just put in a bid to buy control from the founder, and I started looking at it and saw this huge opportunity. It was a great business, it was very profitable, it was growing, but it had a very small team. And so I joined as CEO and started building up the team in the business. But the SurveyMonkey story is also, I think, quite helpful to understand because Ryan, the founder, built SurveyMonkey without ever raising any money, which is incredibly unusual. And not every business will work that way, most won't. But if you can figure out a way to do it, it's really empowering. And he owned the entire business himself, he and his brother. And he started with an idea that happened because someone asked him to do a survey. He was a year out of university, working at a little software company. Someone asked him to do a survey of their new product. He looked around the web and didn't see anything. And that's sort of how most companies start. They start with a problem, a real world problem that someone has. My real world problem is I worked at a record label and I saw that all our great music no one was hearing because we couldn't get it played on the radio. Brian started with this simple project someone assigned him. Someone doesn't assign him that project, he doesn't start SurveyMonkey. It's sometimes that random. Anyway, he built this, he looked around, didn't see anything, so he built his own tool. And then people at the company started using it and they said, hey, you should start a company. Like, lots of people could use this tool. So he quit his job, he started the company, but he didn't know anybody. He was in Madison, Wisconsin, which is very far away, both in actual distance and in mindset from Silicon Valley. And it was 1999, there was a lot of internet stuff going on, but not in Madison, Wisconsin. And so he just figured it out. And he figured out how to build a business that scaled. He created a name that sounds kind of funny, but it's very memorable, and people remembered it. built a product that was really easy for people to use, and that really helped him because it got it out to a lot of people who would never have thought about using a survey tool, and he made it possible for people to use this application for lots of different uses. And then he didn't have any money to do marketing, so he made the product market itself. So the more surveys people send out, the more people learn about us. They remember our funny name, they come back, and they sign up and create their own surveys. We have a free version of the product and a paid version. Most people use the free version. Those people help create value for us, even though they never pay us, because they're going to tell other people about our service, and some of those other people will sign up and eventually pay us. And so through those things, Ryan built a great business. The first 5 years, it was literally just him and his brother. And he created a profitable business. It was profitable almost immediately. And eventually, when he sold Control, you know, it was an incredibly profitable business that was growing very nicely, but he just never had hired anybody. And again, just a very unusual case. I can't say it's the sort of benchmark for what everyone should do, but if you can figure out a way to build a business that you don't need capital for, it's great. And one advantage to that is if you learn to write your own code, which I can't do, if you can write your own software code, or you have a partner who can, that's a huge advantage. So I'm going to slip through these very quickly. I mean, people, you know, use us to help create surveys to get answers to their questions. That's really what they're doing. So, I've talked about this. They use them for lots of different things, not just market research, internally, employee surveys, performance reviews, event planning, in schools to get feedback from parents and teachers. You could do course feedback on your professor. Very good marks, all sorts of different use cases for this tool. It really replaces what a lot of people have used paper, pencil, or simple email for. It's not replacing a market research firm. I talked through this, so I'm going to keep going. Yep, keep going through this. This is just sort of our paid plans, and we have a free version, a paid version. And the paid versions are very inexpensive on a relative basis. And our annual plans, you know, which are around 400 or 500 Rei, you can run as many surveys as you want to as many people as you want. And people share accounts amongst themselves and really get a lot of value out of that. And so we've had people tell us, oh my gosh, I work at a big company, we use SurveyMonkey every week. We should be paying you a lot more money. And it's, sure, we could charge some of those people more money, but other people might not sign up. And we'd rather get as many people as possible to use us. And we're very large. We have almost 50 million unique visitors a month. We're the largest survey company in the world by far. 3 years ago, though, we had 12 employees. So it's a great story. Today we have about 180 employees. We've Rodolfo, who's here, who's a graduate of the school, is our first country manager. Not only our first country manager in Brazil, but our first country manager anywhere. We made a decision to kind of really invest heavily in a couple markets, and Brazil is one of them. Germany and Japan are the others, as we think there's a lot of potential here in Brazil. And that's why I'm down here this week. We're kind of doing our official launch, meeting with journalists and partners and things like that, but we think there's a lot of potential. Yeah. And just in Brazil, we've got a bunch of different customers, and I'm not going to even, every time, the second company, every time I try to say the name, I butcher it, so I won't even bother. But with Peixe Urbano, I have a little bias there because my one angel investment in Brazil is in Peixe Urbano because I knew Julio, who's the founder from Facebook. So they use us. Deloitte is now using us for their training feedback after a training course internally, so a very different use case. Okay, almost stop there. Okay, I've rambled enough now. I'd like to stop and just and take questions. So. Apologies for my voice. I've sort of been talking too much.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. First, for the questions, I'd like to introduce our friend here, FECAP's friend, old FECAP's friend. Here, please. Rodolfo. He was a president of FECAP Junior. Okay. As me, he organized some soccer championships in here. Okay. He did it when I was a student. Okay. Was 2 times a runner-up, but never gained the championship. It's a problem, but it's okay. And he doing a really good work. Okay. And it's a proud for FECAP. Okay. One example for us, for you. Studied the business administration undergraduate course, studied the master science, and is going on. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions now, please? Okay, yes.
Hi, well, I would like to start introducing myself. I am Felipe Matos. I'm getting a degree in business administration in the line of social responsibility. So I would like to keep working with that and with LGBT questions that are close to my own issues. And I know that Google has a service that is very close to what SurveyMonkey does. It's for free and it's very popular here in Brazil.
Yep.
And I would like to know how you feel that. And if you're afraid of that, how are you guys dealing with that? Thank you.
No, it's a good question. So Google does have a product, it's called Google Forms, it's part of Google Apps. And you can do some of the same things with their product that you can do with ours. There's things you can't really do with their product very well. And again, there's not as much difference between a form tool and a survey tool as you would think, but there are some differences. I would say that in a lot of cases, Google Forms is like the best lead generator that we have, because if you start using it to do a survey that's anything complicated, you'll get pretty frustrated pretty quickly, and you'll kind of come over to us and use us. And there are some nice advantages. So for things, for example, if you want to do more than 10 questions for us, that is in our paid product. And you want more than 100 responses for your survey, that's in our paid product. And there aren't those limits on Google, so they have those things. But if you want to figure out how to analyze your results, it's really a mess, the data that comes out of the Google product. And that's what I'm saying. So it's like people may start using it, but if they're going to use it for anything that you probably would end up with our paid product with, you won't stay with the Google product. So it may replace some of our free usage, but I think in the long run it probably helps us more than it hurts us. So we don't see a lot of people saying, oh, I'm going to stop paying for SurveyMonkey and start using Google Forms. That never happens. But we might have some people who get on Google Forms and it meets their needs and they never use our free product, they never get exposed to our paid one. So there's some issue there, but we know the Google people very well. They don't have any intention of kind of coming and making that product better or going into our space. It was kind of something that was thrown together. They don't really do a lot to sort of advance it or support it. But it's a very good question.
Just recording here. You have to, that everybody here, you need to use any tool for surveys. Because our physicists, final works, they need to be done with primary data, okay? Primary data, okay? So you have to use any tool. I think you're using...
And we offer a discount percent.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
using for my final work Google.
Okay, and you are signing up a partnership with Rodolfo. Okay, so let's see what will happen.
We gotta work on getting you switched over.
Okay. Let's know more question.
So hey, you told a lot about Silicon Valley and about failure. I guess here in Brazil, especially in São Paulo, we have this huge difficulty to maybe deal with failure and something like that. So comparing the markets that we have here and we have in Silicon Valley, what do you see that we can do now to change this for maybe like 5 years or 6 or 10 years to get close to Silicon Valley?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So, and I'm only a very casual observer here. So, you know, I don't know that much about Brazil and Sao Paulo. So I take my what I say with that in mind. But I think the best thing you could do is, you know, encourage people who are doing startups. The more people who do them, the more people will see other people doing it. It becomes kind of infectious.